Sometimes encounters arrive without warning, as if a larger force were guiding events from behind the scenes. When this person entered your life, the universe seemed to illustrate the intersection of light and shadow. At the time, this individual was still deeply absorbed in a self-centered phase of their existence. She lived with her gaze fixed on herself, on her image, on how she was perceived. Everything revolved around appearances, status, and external approval. Her presence anywhere was like a self-contained field. She could be surrounded by people, yet only see her own reflection. Many around her may have felt overlooked or insignificant because she did not allow herself to feel anything genuine for others. Relationships were merely tools to fuel her own self-esteem. Love for her was a distant concept. She had never experienced a true connection. She only surrounded herself with people who boosted her ego, reinforced her facade of success, and completed the image she wished to maintain. She was someone who lived to impress. Every choice, from what she wore to who she associated with, was made with the reactions of others in mind. The focus was on recognition, not essence. Perhaps she even bordered on narcissistic behavior, as everything was done based on how she would be seen. If you were by her side, it was because you somehow contributed to that image. And this may not have been immediately clear. Money also played a significant role in this scenario. For her, the value of something or someone often seemed to be measured by prestige, luxury, or popularity. Health, inner well-being, the truth of emotions, all of this was secondary. What mattered was looking good. The universe was already signaling imbalance, but she still lacked the clarity to see it. More than that, this person seemed to be enveloped by a heavy energy. Perhaps she had gotten close to the wrong people, exposed herself to destructive environments, participated in questionable situations, not out of malice, but due to a disconnection with her own soul, as if she had forgotten she possessed one. And that is why, when you appeared, something so intense occurred. You approached her, a jolt of contrast. Your presence brought calm, lucidity, sincerity. While she was noise, you were silence. As she revolved around an image, you exuded truth. It was as if for the first time this person saw the reflection of something they had lost or perhaps never known, authenticity. And that is when everything changed. Even without understanding, she noticed something different about you. A vibration that calmed, a lightness that did not strive to be accepted, a strength that did not scream but was impossible to ignore. Your spirituality, your purposeful way of living, your peace, all of this disarmed her. You did not try to prove anything, you were simply yourself. And that was enough to challenge what she believed about love, value, and connection. It was as if the universe, through your energy, said to her, "Look again, there is another way to live." She saw in you what she could not tolerate in herself, and it confused her, but it also awakened her. For the first time, perhaps, she began to question everything. There are people who carry a whirlwind inside, but they hide it well. They engage with the world, they cloak themselves in certainty, they project an image of security, but inside them are restless voices, unending thoughts, fear of not being enough, fear of not being truly loved. It was in this internal landscape that this person found you. And something curious happened. As she drew near you, the noise inside her subsided. Not because you spoke the right words or offered advice, but because your mere presence was like a field of silence, a space where she could finally breathe. It was strange for her at first. She did not know how to handle this relief. She had never met anyone whose energy brought so much peace. It was as if the universe used you as a respite from the chaos, and it impacted her more than she herself was able to admit. While you walked with firm feet on your own spiritual journey, she was still searching for herself, but something about you inspired her. It was as if she saw for the first time that there was a different path. Not the path of control, of ego, of appearances, but the path of surrender, of connection with something greater. She watched you curiously. She wanted to understand how you managed to be so authentically yourself, without needing anyone's approval. How did you manage to live lightly without hiding? How could you say no without guilt? How could you be kind without giving up? All of this affected her because these were things she had never been able to do. And then an internal conflict arose. On the one hand, she was deeply attracted to who you were. On the other hand, she felt intimidated. Your authenticity seemed to place her in front of a mirror. And that mirror showed her everything she still needed to heal. You were a constant reminder to her of who she wanted to become and also how far she was from that. And it is at this point that many feelings began to mix. She began to idealize you. She began to see you as someone far above what she believed she could achieve. She put you on a pedestal, not out of malice, but out of insecurity. She felt she did not deserve someone like you, that you were too much light for someone who still lived surrounded by shadows. Still, she could not pull away emotionally. Something inside her insisted on returning to that connection. She thought about you more than she admitted. She observed your movements, trying to understand who you were talking to, what you were posting, who was responding to you. Sometimes she did it in silence, trying to keep a safe distance, but her mind was always there with you. She did not know how to approach without feeling afraid. She was afraid of not being enough, of saying the wrong thing, of being rejected by someone she saw as so complete, so whole. She was constantly comparing herself to the people around you, to those who came close to you, to everything you did. And the more she compared herself, the smaller she felt. The universe, however, wasn't punishing this person by placing them before you. It was actually offering her a chance to see herself with new eyes, to recognize how much she could still grow, how much she could change if she had the courage to face her own wounds. You were that turning point, but she still struggles with her own limitations. She knows you feel something deep. She recognizes that what she is experiencing with herself cannot be compared to anything she has ever experienced, but she also knows that she needs to rebuild herself to be able to truly experience this feeling. And that scares her. She was never truly vulnerable with anyone, never allowed herself to love without defenses. And now, when love presents itself in its most raw and honest form, she finds herself paralyzed, because you don't demand, you don't pressure, you don't manipulate, you just are, and that completely disarms her. She still doesn't know how to deal with this type of love, but even though she's scared, she knows that this connection isn't common, it's something rare, a call for transformation. Change doesn't always start with a conscious choice. Sometimes it begins with discomfort, with a question that bothers, with a presence that disorganizes. And that's exactly what you became to that person, a presence impossible to ignore, one that exposed the cracks in the world she had built to protect herself. For a long time, she believed that it was enough to look good, to have something to show, to have someone who admired her. And that worked for a while, until it stopped working, because something inside was still empty. And when she met you, the contrast was so strong that the illusion could no longer be sustained. She realized that she was tired of living in a submissive state, of molding herself to please, of depending on the acceptance of others to feel valid. Her life was a series of characters, and she no longer knew where the role ended and what was true in her began. The universe, through your presence, began to pull the loose threads of this plot. It began to show that real value is not in appearance, nor in what others think, but in the peace you feel when you are whole inside. You represented exactly that, someone who didn't need to be accepted because he was already at peace with who he was. And this realization was both healing and painful, because in seeing your authenticity, she was forced to face her own lack of truth, her dependence on validation, her unhealed wounds. She began to admire you in a way that went beyond physical attraction. You became a reference, a model of quiet strength, of simple beauty, of true spirituality. Someone who walked with an open heart and had the courage to be. This touched her deeply and also scared her. As much as she felt like getting closer, something inside her told her that she wasn't worthy, that she wasn't careful, that she wouldn't be able to maintain the same level. It was as if, instead of being fully inspired, she was comparing herself. And the more she compared herself, the more insecure she became. She even doubted what you felt. She thought, is this real? Am I idealizing it? Could someone like you really love someone like her? And in this internal game of doubts, she ended up withdrawing. She started to distance herself, to avoid you, to pretend she didn't care when, in reality, she thought about you every day. She saw your photos, read your posts, observed your interactions, tried to understand who the people around you were. She was afraid of being forgotten, but she also couldn't make herself available. Pride, shame, fear of failure, all of these kept her silent. The strongest thing, however, was the feeling she couldn't name, something that made her want to be better, not to please you, but to become someone capable of living something true. She began, albeit discreetly, to ask different questions, to question her habits, her patterns, her impulses. The universe, as it always does when we make ourselves available for change, began to act. It brought situations that put her face to face with her shadows, removed masks, dispelled illusions, and even though this process was painful, she began to awaken. Your spirituality, the same one she didn't understand before, became a source of inspiration. She found herself longing for a similar connection, wanting to understand more, to get closer to something bigger, to find meaning. You planted seeds, and even though she is still learning how to care for them, something inside her has already changed forever. She knows that she can't go back to the way things were before, that the old is no longer useful, but she's still not sure how to build the new one. Everything is unknown, and that's scary, because growing up is sometimes more painful than staying in the same place. She feels like you see her in a different way, that you're not there to judge her, but to show her possibilities. And that's what challenges her the most. You never demanded anything, never asked her to change. You were just being real. There are feelings that arrive like a hurricane and turn everything upside down. And there are others that act silently, infiltrating the cracks in everyday life until they become impossible to ignore. That's how this person started to feel love for you. It wasn't an immediate scare, it was a build-up. One day, she realized that she could no longer think about life without you, in some corner of her mind. But love, when it comes to someone who has never really experienced it, is scary because it demands surrender. And handing it over to someone who has always built walls is terrifying. She began to notice that you were different from everything she had ever known, not because you were perfect, but because you were real. And that made everything around it lose a little of its shine. The empty conversations, the image-based relationships, the shallow connections, nothing seemed satisfying anymore. She began to realize that you awakened something in her that no other person could, the desire to be seen for who she really is. But with that desire also came fear. Fear of not being able to keep up with you, fear of not being enough, fear of disappointing you. She looked at you and saw someone confident, authentic, centered, and compared herself to her own instability, to the mistakes she still made, to the shadows she still couldn't illuminate. It was as if you were the sun and she was a cloudy night. As a form of self-protection, she began to pull away. Not truly, because emotionally she was still attached to you, but she created a space. She tried not to show it, pretended to be fine, and avoided deep conversations. That's when the universe started to act differently. Instead of showing the beauty of connection, it began to expose the pain of separation. She began to feel an emptiness she couldn't explain. Life went on, people continued to be around, but nothing filled the void. Accomplishments lost their taste. Compliments no longer soothed her. Everything that once fed her ego was no longer useful. Now, she knew what it was like to feel something real, and she could no longer settle for less. She started watching you from a distance. She tried to understand if there was still room for her in your world, but instead of getting closer, she retreated. Her self-esteem was shaken. She felt that you had many options, that you attracted people easily, that you were admired and desired. And she saw herself as someone ordinary, insecure, full of scars. She believed that even if she declared herself, you would reject her, that she wouldn't be able to sustain the love you deserve, and that is why she preferred silence. Even if this silence kept her trapped in repetitive thoughts, in a cycle of hope and fear, the truth is that she idealized you. She created an image of you so elevated that she forgot that, no matter how strong you seem, you also have your weaknesses, that just like her, you also miss someone, you also have doubts, you also want to be truly understood. The universe, with all its wisdom, does not orchestrate encounters like this by chance. When two souls recognize each other, it is because there is something to be experienced, even if the timing or format is still uncertain. This person, though full of insecurities, feels that there is something between you that goes beyond logic. She thinks about looking for you, often rehearsing what to say. She imagines what it would be like to send you a message, meet you by chance, start a conversation, but she always gets stuck. Something inside her still says that she is not ready, that she needs to grow more, that she needs to heal more, but that desire has never stopped existing. She still believes that you are special, unique, and even from afar, she continues to feed on the memory of your energy. She remembers moments, words, exchanges of glances. She imagines what it would be like if she had had more courage, what it would be like if fear had not won. She doesn't know how to change it, but she knows that what she feels for you is not common. It's something rare. It's something that, even if time passes, will continue to echo within her. There comes a time when silence screams louder than any words. And that's exactly where the universe steps in. When paths seem blocked, when distance seems definitive, when the feeling is too big to fit between the lines, the universe speaks, and today it wants you to know, none of this was in vain. This connection shook everything up. It touched dormant places. It awakened parts of you that you didn't even know existed. And even if it feels messy, painful, or unfinished right now, there is something sacred being stitched together behind the scenes. Because the universe doesn't bring two souls together for nothing. That person who still watches you in silence, she feels, and she feels a lot. She doesn't speak, but her heart calls you. She doesn't come close, but she carries you in her thoughts. She doesn't act, but lives every detail as if she were still by your side. Because deep down she knows that what she experienced with you was no small thing. She is still going through an intense internal process. She is learning, perhaps for the first time, to look at herself more truthfully, to stop hiding behind appearances, to face her own fears. All this because she met you, because she felt in your presence that there is a possible life beyond control, image, ego, a life lived with the heart. But she also feels fear. Fear of not measuring up, fear of not being loved back, fear that you've moved on. And that's why she walks away, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares so much that she doesn't know how to deal with the intensity of what she feels. The universe wants you to know that what you experienced awakened a healing process in her. A process that is not always visible, but is real. And more than that, it wants you to understand that this process is also happening within you. You didn't cross this person's path by chance. You were an instrument of revelation. You were a beacon in the middle of the fog. You were a firm presence in a world of masks, and that transformed both of you. It may be that at this moment the silence continues, it may be that there is no immediate rapprochement, but there is something that cannot be undone, the impact, the change, the memory, the echo of what was felt, and that still reverberates in both of them. Maybe one day she will have the courage to look for you, maybe not. But what matters now is not what will happen next, it's what it all meant, what it taught you, how much you've grown. You offered love without demanding anything in return. You were you. And that's rare, that's beautiful, that's strong. If this story touched you, the universe invites you to reflect on how much you also need to embrace yourself, how much you are still waiting for validation from others to feel complete. This person saw you as someone confident and enlightened, but do you see yourself that way? It's time to look at yourself with more generosity, with more recognition, because you are special. And it's not just her who sees this, the universe sees it too. And it's telling you now, you are love, you are enough, you are light. Even when you doubt it, the universe doesn't want you to wait, it wants you to live, to expand, to trust. If this connection is to be reborn, it will be at the right time, in the right space, in the most healed version of both of you. But in the meantime, choose yourself. Choose the path that strengthens you, that feeds you, that makes you grow. Because the true reunion, before happening with the other, happens within you. If this story inspired you, consider what changes you've noticed within yourself since this encounter.